do that.
Right. Well, good morning, everyone. Glad to be here to speak to you about what I perceive as best practice for managing legacies. So let's get my presentation in front of you. Yes, you are going to have to sit through a presentation. So let's get that there and we can make a start. So there's a little bit about who I am. Paul Browne, Head of Legacy Administration at LegacyLink. I've been a legacy administrator in the sector for well over 10 years now. Managed thousands of legacies, and hopefully I've picked up a few tips that can be useful to all of you when it comes to doing legacy administration. So let's move along. Okay, what I'm not going to give you today is a checklist. When I talk about best practice for a legacy officer is very much built around your mindset, the way you approach the role. So for me, it's really important to talk about what good looks like. What is the reality of being a legacy officer as a starting point? You should have a lot of sensitivity. You should treat everyone involved with respect. I know this sounds obvious, but sometimes we forget. Solicitors are human beings too. So we do have to keep that in mind as we're dealing with the process and getting things done. So treat everyone with respect. We must be very open. We must be clear and challengeable at any point so that people understand what we're doing and why we're doing it as a legacy officer. So make sure everyone knows where you're going. Take people with you on the work. You have to, and that leads nicely into trustworthiness, integrity. We must hold ourselves to the highest moral standards when we are being legacy officers. It's a really important part of the role. So you have to be trusted and you have to be able to trust those around you. So make those standards stick. Then it comes to collaboration. Now, everyone talks about collaboration, but I think as legacy officers, we are some of the broadest collaborators in the whole sector. We are dealing with everyone. We are dealing with families, friends, solicitors, accountants, other charities. We're dealing all over this, estate agents, anyone involved in the whole process. So collaboration is our kind of superpower as legacy officers. I always feel it's the thing we do better than everyone else. We go right across the sector, right across the people involved, and we're generally pretty good at it, I would say, as a group. Then we have to stay up to date. We do spend a lot of time getting ourselves qualified as legacy officers, whether it be a legal qualification, a law degree, being a legal exec, or the CICLA through the ILM. And then we build on experience. But as a group, we're very good at staying up to date. We attend lots of seminars, do lots of personal development. So it's one of those ones that I think as a legacy officer, you constantly have to be up to speed with what's going on in the world around you at any given time. So keep that one in mind. Next slide. What do we do? Well, at the core of what a legacy officer does, you're representing the charity. Now that sounds like it's a very easy thing to say, but it applies at so many levels. You are representing them day to day with the deceased family, with other charities. You're the face of that charity in this process. So you've got to keep that in mind in everything you do. We identify complexity and we resolve it. So with legacy administration, as those of you that carry it out every day will understand, we deal with everything. We could be dealing with this from the beginning. We could be organizing someone's funeral. We could be emptying their house. We could be dealing with all their friends and family. There's so many people that we're involved with. It becomes an incredibly complex role. We can be dealing with the HMRC. We can be dealing with the probate service. We can be dealing with a couple of firms of solicitors, co-beneficiaries. So there's an awful lot that you get involved with. So the complexity comes from many different areas. I don't specifically mean contention here, legal challenges. I mean just complexity around estates. They can become incredibly demanding over any period of time. Then there's the obvious one that everyone remembers is optimizing income. Optimizing income is, yes, it's a duty that we have, but it's not as simple as just making sure we get the maximum in. It's making sure we get the right gift, making sure the right amount of money comes in at the right time to ensure that the estate is properly processed as per the deceased wishes. I always kind of think of this one in the light of, I'm the last defender of the deceased wishes when I'm doing my job. It's the thing that empowers me, is being that last defender of what they wanted to happen. So optimize the income, yes, but always in the light of why you're doing that, who you're doing that for. Think about that as you're dealing with it. Obviously, we're encouraging legacy giving by our behavior. So it should be a good experience for anyone involved with us, even those that are sometimes challenging to deal with. So it's a real opportunity for you as the legacy officer to represent your charity and really give a positive experience for people involved in the estate. Really good opportunity to do the right thing, lead by example to all those that you're working with who don't necessarily have the experience or ability to do so. So that's a nice, easy one. They're encouraging legacy giving, obviously. We all do that. Accurately record case data. I like this one. I'm a real data fiend when it comes to doing legacy administration. I'm very much a people person, but the data can tell you so much. It's really important that we record all of that data that we acquire during the legacy administration process in an accessible and accurate way, because it can set so many targets for you. It can help your charity with planning its income. It can easily sort out the whole nightmare that is accruals. We'll cover that a bit more later, but hopefully not too much. But the data there can then also feed back into your marketing. If you can understand when somebody's will was created, you can then look back and see what your marketing experience was at the same time that the will was created. So you can then start building up a long-term picture of how your marketing does. Does it generate PECs? Does it generate residuaries by default? And you can start to understand things. So data becomes incredibly important the more you look into it and the more that you collect as part of the legacy administration. And then last of all, there's my dog's apologies, everyone. Reputational care. Because of all of the things I've said before, all the people we're involved with, the different people we're reaching out to, the different people we're touching during the administration process, it's incredibly important that we're always aware of the reputational issues around us, the damage we could do by mishandling a family member or a friend, the way we could in damaging a relationship potentially with a solicitor that does lots of wills for your charity locally, that kind of thing. So reputation is more than just that, the worry that the BBC is going to march in and shove a microphone in your face. It's actually about the impact you have in the broader locality and the relationships with all those people that support your charity directly and indirectly. So one to keep in mind. Okay, so let's jump on now and let's have a look at our breakout room. So the discussion topic I would like you all to go away and think about for a few minutes is, what is the biggest challenge you face in legacy administration day to day? Think broadly. It's not just about do you get the minutes, but yeah, if that's your biggest challenge, do you get the time to do the job properly? That could be there. It could be anything to do with, it could be support internally, it could be any of those things. So let's have the breakout. I believe you're going to initiate everyone into the breakout room. Let's have room 1. That was Lisa, Miriam and Vicky. So who's your spokesman?
I am.
Hi, Lisa. Go on then, let's hear what you had to say from that group.
I think you're muted, Lisa.
Sorry, mine keeps disappearing, changing between my microphone and my computer, so it keeps muting automatically. Apologies.
No worries.
So the people in our group were kind of across the board, so it wasn't just legacy admin, they were also fundraisers. So it's about maximizing the resources available to you. I think that's kind of one of the main issues, and people, resources and ownership and who deals with it. So that kind of is a kind of challenge for the vast majority of the people in the group. But for us, I would say it's kind of the administration on a day-to-day. I would say emails. I mean, emails are great, but when you've got a case with 10, 15 co-bens and everybody sends the same, agreed, and you've got them jamming up your inbox for maybe 5 cases, and then you go to import every single one into first class. It's that to me is personally my biggest challenge, because it's just time consuming. It's great, but if I could import as a bulk into first class, that would be game changer.
Wonderful. Thanks for that, Lisa. Thank you for that, room. Room 2, who's your spokesman? That's Daniela, Joanna, Joe and Melissa.
That will be me then.
Hello.
Hello. So we also had quite a broad range of people within the group, but our key thing really was either a lack of information. So sometimes we will receive a legacy and we won't have received any paperwork, and getting up-to-date information. Obviously, legacies can take a long time, so you're not always necessarily up to speed on where things are. They're being handled by solicitors, etc.
Wonderful. Very interesting. That's a common one, I have to say. Wonderful. Right. Room 3. So that'd be Elizabeth, Ellen, Emma, and Sarah.
Hello, it's Ellen here, who was the novice in the room legacy-wise, so hence I offered to take the notes. So there seem to be issues around being able to forecast for budgets, and also getting senior managers above understanding that it's difficult to forecast. That was one area, and then there was quite a cluster of conversations around the quality of solicitors' fees, and the difference between Scottish solicitors and English solicitors. That seemed to be a little flurry, and then sort of alongside that was again the quality of some of the executives that you're having to work with who may not fully understand inheritance tax, etc. So they seem to be a clusters of comments around the budgeting and working with solicitors.
Okay, I wish we had more time to expand on those. That sounds we could have an excellent conversation.
You have written an article on.
I have.
Pushing back on solicitors' fees. So I think we all made a note of that. Whoever obviously follows your blogs.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, whoever that was. Right. Okay. Well, thank you very much. That's a very interesting letter of feedback. And then finally, room 4. So that's Hannah, Katie, and Phil.
Yeah, so our sort of was all sort of fairly new to legacy stuff in our room, sort of just kind of making sure that we have appropriate time to be able to make sure that everything's logged correctly, because you never know that one piece of important information that you might need it's not accurately sort of recorded, and that could just cause massive issues down the line. And just making sure, again, sort of similar to room 1, having the resources to sort of appropriately and sensitively sort of be able to market the legacy program for your charity.
Wonderful. Yeah, and so that's quite a common theme there, isn't there, across the groups? So there is a resource issue applied to, and then there's obviously the dealing with the less than optimal contacts we sometimes have to deal with. So, oh, that's brilliant feedback from everyone. Thank you very much. Really, really very useful and interesting to hear. So what we'll do now is we'll whiz on with my much more specific recommendations moving forward. So let's jump on to a new subject. Okay, and if my
Are we recording again?
Yeah.
Great. Well, thanks everyone. Okay, so let's move on. Thoughtful proactivity, how to stay on top of your cases. There's this wonderful German phrase, which I'm not going to butcher with my English pronunciation there. But basically what that means, this comes from, it's a design philosophy, and it's less but better. And I think it wonderfully applies to legacy administration. This was popularized by Browne in the 1960s when they redesigned the turntable from being a huge piece of living room furniture, an old music center, down to the modern turntable we recognize today, if anybody's old enough to still have LPs on the call. But it's basically about doing less, but making it much better. And I think this very much applies to the proactivity on your cases. There is quite a lot of the sector are really rigid about the way they review cases. They say, oh, you must every so many weeks, you must every so many hours, make this contact, must do this, must do that. I'm much more pragmatic about the way you review cases, and it's very firmly, when is it needed? So when you're looking at your cases, if the review after, say, let's think about a pecuniary case, if a pecuniary case would normally be chased every 12 weeks. I find that completely inappropriate and a waste of everyone's time. Most pecuniary cases, if you look at your records, probably come in, you will be notified, you will write a beautiful acknowledgement letter out to the executor or solicitor, and then they'll probably come in inside of a year by themselves. You don't need to do a great deal of work on them. That's not necessarily saying you should abandon them, but I would not waste your time chasing them if especially if the executive's year is not complete. But then if you haven't had if your average time period has not been exceeded, then I wouldn't put the energy into chasing them. And the same goes for your residuary cases. Yes, we should be making regular contact. Yes, we should be, I normally work on a 12-week period for residuary reviews, but you don't have to do it every 12 weeks. If you're in that kind of dead zone just after you've been notified, you've had the initial communication, you've got all your initial data, what's the point in chasing the solicitor another 6 to 12 weeks on? they're still in mood flow, they're trying to get everything together, you can take a more pragmatic approach to it and say, well, at this point in the process, am I adding anything by chasing the solicitor, chasing the lay executor? Lay executors in particular, they have lives, they're dealing with grief, that kind of thing. Why are you harassing them at an early point in the case? So give it some consideration and see if you can pragmatically review the way you review your cases. So give it some time. Then there's the golden question, which is one of the things that we all suffer from as legacy officers. What do I actually need? There's lots of things we would like on our files, lots of bits of paper, lots of evidence, but actually, what do we need? There's a very short list of things that you're actually entitled to as a legacy officer. A good example, say on a residuary case, many of us will know legacy officers that demand this, that, and dozens of the document. Suggest have a look at what you're actually entitled to. And actually the list is really short. Will, grant, and estate accounts. You can probably tag on to that an OHT 400 to get the tax calculation and an R185 at the end. But they're the only documents you're actually vitally entitled to on a case. So I would approach this, again, very pragmatically. What do I actually need to meet my requirements? What do I actually need to meet my auditor's demands? The auditors will only ask you to provide what you need, what you're entitled to. Anything beyond that, and the auditors need to be told that I'm not able to do that. It's not something that I'm able to give you. So just keep that in mind. Think about what you actually need. The ILM produces a very good guide for executors and for solicitors that is not paywall behind a membership. You can get it on the website that gives you a breakdown of all the documents that are actually vital to your cases. So nice and easy one to follow up on there. I can circulate the link at the end. So very much the 3 Ps when it comes to thoughtful proactivity. It is about being pragmatic. Do I actually need to do this? Be proportional. Is it worth me doing this? What is the value of what I'm about to do, what I'm about to demand from the person? And then have a plan. And this goes back to your timings. Review your timings. Is it necessary? Is it appropriate? But those 3, if you think about those when you're approaching your work, it should allow you to stay on top of your cases without going through a checklist mentality. I have to because this is 12 weeks, 8 weeks, whatever your targets are. Do it on need based on what the case is asking of you. Right. Property sales. Now, this is an area that most legacy officers are a little bit uncomfortable these days. There tends to be an assumption that everybody's bought a house, everybody's sold a house, and is comfortable with the way the process works. I did a kind of hands-up survey amongst a group of legacy officers, and it was quite shocking that only one person out of about 80 in the room had actually bought and sold a house twice in their lifetime personally. So their level of experience of the property process was quite low. So it's really important that you understand, if you're dealing with a legacy case, that you understand the nature of what the property involved is, that you understand what you're trying to achieve. If you don't have the level of experience and expertise in property sales, then get some advice. Talk to the people in the sector, talk to other legacy officers. Don't be afraid to approach professionals. People like Berries, Cluttons, they are the partners of ILM. They will happily talk to you and give you outline guidance and outline advice without you having to get a bill, as it were. So make sure you're properly aware of the nature of the property, why it's being sold, is it in good condition, bad condition, the status of what's going on. Don't just let it pass you by. When it comes to reports, everyone's obviously aware about the requirements of getting a Charities Act report, a Section 119 report, as they're usually known. This is not exclusively to the situation where you are going to appropriate a property, because that's usually what demands it. Getting a report can be really handy if there is an argument over the way a property is sold, if no one's confident about the way an agent is doing it or a solicitor is doing it. A Section 119 report will give you advice on the best way to market the property, a suggestion in that report. It will obviously give you outlines on condition, all these kind of things that will help you understand the situation with the property better. Very often you will find that a solicitor dealing will have local contacts and will only be used to be working with them. So sometimes it's a good idea to get an independent set of eyes run over a property before you agree to a sale that devalues it by a significant amount or You maybe don't understand why it's being sold for such a small amount. So don't be afraid to ask for reports, ask for surveys, and ask for professional advice before you agree to a sale. Obviously, there's then the pragmatic side of selling a property. We all want the property to get sold. So we're very often pressurized as charities that we should allow a certain amount of market exposure before we accept an offer on a property. This is good advice to ensure that the property is given a genuine chance to find its level in the marketplace. But I think in a dynamic market like we have right now, where sales can be hard to come by, and let's not even talk about retirement properties. We don't have another 3 hours to have fun talking about that. But in general, it's very much worth considering the offers you're given. It's the old adage of a bird in the hand is better than one in the bush. If you can get a sale carried out and the price is about where you want it to be and it agrees with your professional advice, then sometimes it's worth considering, even if you haven't had what would be considered the normal market exposure, say for a month or 6 weeks. So again, don't be too entrenched in what the rules are. They're there to protect you as much as anything. But if you get the opportunity to get a good result for the estate, it's really worth considering doing so. Right, investments. Now, make the disposals work for you. The reason I say that is very often we just get a solicitor to sell shares or whatever it is and resolve these things without any consideration for what the best way to get rid of them is. A solicitor will simply instruct the sale of those shares from their desk. They will just sit down and go, right, time to sell those shares because I'm ready to do it. They make no consideration for, is this the best time to sell the shares? Are these shares at a high point, low point? In most cases, I hasten to add. What I would always suggest you do is understand what the estate holds. Get a bit of understanding. You'll generally, most charities, in my experience, do have a relationship that manages their own investments. So if you have a professional advisor associated with your charity, get their phone number, have a chat to them, say, would you be able to take a look at something for us that we're on an estate I'm looking at? You'll find that most of them are usually agreeable to that. So that you understand what's going on and you can take appropriate action, either on asking the solicitor to delay a sale or doing something creative, either appropriate the shares directly to your charity or have them transferred straight to your charity if you're the sole beneficiary. This can be very profitable because you can choose the time of the selling of the shares or add them to your charity's own investments. So there's a lot of value to be saved there. I did one quite recently where the transfer value was something like £260,000, but in the end we sold them for near over £400,000. There was a big profit there in just taking the shares into the charity's portfolio and selling them at a later date under expert management, as it were. So this stuff is not actually very difficult. You just have to have a plan, be prepared, and have the right contacts to do it. So worth considering. And then, of course, with investments, you've got to think about the ethical side. If you're, for example, a cancer care charity, you may not be interested in taking shares in a tobacco company. I had to reject £2.6 million worth of shares from back in the day when it was British American Tobacco for a particular charity I was working with at the time because it was against their ethical policy. A very brave decision as far as I was concerned, but one that you have to start thinking about these days. What shares are you being offered? If you are taking them into your portfolio, make sure they meet the ethical background of your charity. Okay, tax dodging. Well, there's so much of this we can do, which is entirely legal and appropriate for charities to do. So we're all very aware of the inheritance tax exemption that charities enjoy. So one of the first things you have to do is make sure that the tax is calculated correctly. Now, if this is outside of your expertise, then this is a really good time to ask for help. There are plenty of professionals associated with the ILM or with your charities who will, I'm sure, chip in and help you ensure that the IHT has been correctly calculated and apportioned. And what I mean by apportioned is the right people are paying the right amount of IHT in the estate. Very often solicitors may miss where it goes and who it's going to. It's also worth checking that all the potential reliefs are claimed against IHT, inheritance tax. You'll see there lots of little acronyms: transferable nil rate band, residence nil rate band, transferable residence nil rate band, agricultural business relief, and small business relief. For just a few there for you to play with. So there's lots of reliefs available depending on the nature of the estate and the assets involved. So make sure that the solicitor has claimed the appropriate reliefs. And don't assume the probate professional understands. With the greatest respect, a lot of them will encounter charities very irregularly as part of their job, and they won't be completely understanding of things like Benham estates and that kind of stuff. So it's always worth making sure that the carefully and humbly making sure that the solicitor understands the calculation they should be doing. So do keep that in mind. Once you've done with inheritance tax, there's capital gains on assets that can be very much mitigated, in fact, pretty much removed, if you can appropriate assets that have gained. Now, what this means is from death to the point of disposal, if that asset has gained any value, then potentially they can be paying tax on it, depending on what it is at full capital gains rates. If that's appropriated to the charity, this is avoided or mitigated. So well worth considering. And like I said about the shares, you can transfer them in specie, which is actually taking them straight to you directly into your charity. So don't just be tempted to take the cash because it's the simplest option. You could be giving up quite a lot of money in terms of mitigating capital gains if you don't handle those properly. And it's also worth keeping in mind that pensions and life insurance can be held in trust outside of the estate. So if you as fundraisers are talking to your supporters, it's worth pointing out that there is this potential for somebody to put their pension benefit or life policy in trust so that it skips straight to the beneficiary on death. It doesn't enter their estate. So that's really helpful for the estate in terms of the estate's taxation, and it means the money comes straight to, if it's left to a charity, comes straight to the charity directly from the life or pension company. So well worth looking into. And again, I can't emphasize enough, if you're not sure about any of this or are unclear on what the potentials are, speak to somebody who can help you, a professional of some kind. There's lots of us about who will point you in the right direction or guide you. So keep that in mind as you're going along. Let's jump along. Okay, checking accounts. This one really is, it's not just about the adding up. So best practice here is obviously you do have to make sure they add up. And this is where our finance teams often want to get involved and say, well, we'll check them for you and then everything's good. Well, that's not the main reason you're looking at estate accounts. The main reason you're looking at estate accounts is to ensure that everything that's gone through them is correct from the estate point of view. So there is no common standard for estate accounts, as I'm sure you're all aware. Every time you get a set of estate accounts, they'll be subtly different or even completely majorly different and written in a school book or something, which I've had in the past. What you're looking to do is make sure that all the ins and outs, all the money coming in has been appropriately handled, and that any money that's left the estate, again, is appropriate and correct. So you're looking at this from the technical point of view rather than from an adding up point of view. Like I said there, you can often gain hints of maybe if there's something murky going on. So if there's bills for gardening and it's a third floor flat, why did I say that? Then you will often find, you can say, well, why am I getting a gardening bill on a flat? Why I'm getting bills for trees being removed, things like that. So you can often get hints as to things you want to check into. Maybe it's an undisclosed asset for whatever reason hasn't made it through into the estate accounts. You're also looking for the generosity of executors. They will very often become very generous executors with other people's money. So it is well worth looking that any payments haven't been made inappropriately or outside of the will. It's quite common to find, money, say £5,000 given to a neighbour for looking after a cat for 3 weeks after the person's died. So do keep that in mind when you're looking through those estate accounts. Make sure any gifts or expenses paid are appropriate and in line with the will, because you're there protecting the deceased wishes. And then the final one that tends to get very contentious is the solicitor's fees in processing the estate. There are lots of guides. There's obviously the Gemma Trust judgment, which you can look up. But we do have a horrible figure that we hold in mind on most estates. We say as long as the fees are less than 5% of the gross estate, it's fine. I don't subscribe to that. I think fees should be appropriate to the amount of work involved. So make sure when you're looking at solicitors or probate professionals' costs that you are accepting an appropriate fee. If it's for closing 3 bank accounts and sending you the money, they shouldn't be charging 12, 13% of the estate. or 2%, depending on the size of the estate. It just depends on how much work they have to do, and keep that in mind, especially when it comes to value add fees. A lot of solicitors will charge a fee, two fees, one based on value of the general assets and one based on the property value. So they'll just take an extra chunk because there are these valued assets in an estate. So again, make sure they're appropriate. And if you feel they're not appropriate, then as somebody mentioned earlier, myself and Maggie have written a very good article on challenge solicitors' fees, which is in the press and around there at the moment. Also, there's another little trend that's worth pointing out is a lot of professional firms are then buying insurance for their executors. So if a solicitor stands as executor on the estate that they administer, they're then buying an executor's insurance for their directors. I find this a little bit naughty because you're paying the solicitors rates for their expertise and knowledge, and you shouldn't be having to pay to insure them for doing a job that you're paying them quite a high rate to do. So again, keep an eye out for that. The tax calculations, as we covered in the slide a couple of slides ago. So lots to think about there when you come to look at estate accounts. Okay, let's just check the time. Oh, we're good. Okay. So reporting requirements. Now, this was a specific request. Now, I had to think about this, and I wondered, what did we mean by reporting requirements? Now, for me, reporting, it can be broken down into 3 areas. You've got the simple stuff like how many notifications do we get? What is our pipeline value? What's our income? They're relatively straightforward to do. I would always say for any charity that the 2 most important things you should keep an eye on are your level of notifications compared to previous years and your pipeline value compared to previous years. Reason being that if your notifications are at the same level or higher than previous years, chances are you'll carry on receiving an appropriate level of notifications. And then your pipeline values will be supported because you've received a similar number of notifications. So as long as your notification numbers and pipeline values are sustained or increasing, you know that your income is likely to be in the same level or slightly higher than previous years. So they're your kind of key indicators when it comes to reporting legacies. They're the basics. There's lots of other stuff you can do depending on the system you have. I suspect most of you will not have first class, which is the kind of Rolls Royce we all get used to when we're working at bigger charities that gives us all this lovely information in a nice package. But it's very easy to do this kind of reporting depending on which system you use. Even if it's a spreadsheet, it's relatively easy to track notifications over a period and your pipeline values, because pipelines are just a snapshot of what you're working on at any given time. Income, again, you're recording it as you go, so not too much of an issue there in terms of reporting that if you don't have a fancy system like First Class. But it is possible to get most systems, be it Salesforce, Razor's Edge, NXT, Thank You, whichever one you have, it is relatively straightforward to get that basic information out using their standard reporting. I've done it myself on many occasions, so they're the ones to keep in mind. Then we're looking at the kind of more management-y type information. So the next group would be use of your delegated authority. Now, I haven't covered what a delegated authority is because it's essentially just the trustees giving you as a legacy officer permission to do certain things on their behalf, i.e. sign a receipt, approve accounts, engage legal advice, whatever it is. But the important thing about delegated authority is you should be telling the trustees how you're using it. They need to know. So there should be reporting in place to say where you've exercised your delegated authority. So one to look into. Hopefully you've all got a delegated authority. If you haven't, look into it. And if you have, make sure you're reporting back on its use in a general sense. The other area of this kind of reporting is your trustees should need to know about complex cases and issues. Now, I'm specifically not saying contentious here because complexity is as dangerous as contention because it draws your time in. These are the cases that suck you in and take hours and hours of your time and can potentially cause cost to your charity and reduce your gift. So it's really important that you report on any cases that are going outside of the norm so that your management team are aware of what's going on. Really important to do that because they need to be able to plan for it. They need to be able to adjust accruals, income planning, all of these things. It has impacts across the board. So complexity is the killer, not necessarily just contention. So keep that in mind. And by complexity, I mean, you could have a case where there are 23 properties to sell in someone's investment portfolio. It could be that there's a particular family challenge going on where members of the family are arguing about things. So just keep in mind, be broad-minded about what complex is, but your real marker is if a case is taking your time, mark it as complex, okay, and report it. Then there's the final batch here. There's the statutory reporting and accounts. Now that is just purely the information you have to provide to your finance, or your finance team has to provide to your charity tax return and your charity returns to ensure that they can properly identify and understand legacies and their value within your accounts. And then there's the horrible little dark hole of accrual. Now accrual, again, we could spend about 3 days talking about accrual and no one would be happy. But accrual is something that is easy to report on if you're consistent. And you must be consistent in the way you record your new legacies, you estimate your new legacies, and you plan the expected income. As long as those 3 things are, you have a consistent, regular policy on how you do that, it should be pretty straightforward to report on what you can and can't accrue for your finance teams. If you don't get involved in accruals, well, you're very lucky. But if you do, then it's really about taking the time and making sure you have a solid, consistent process. Going to sound really boring and data-y there, but it's all about consistency when it comes to accrual. Okay. Hopefully that covered the request about reporting requirements. Okay, good. All right. Next one we need to cover really quickly is indemnities. The short version is don't give indemnities, except when you do. There are very few cases where it is appropriate for you to give an indemnity, a very limited indemnity in terms of time and amount. Say, for example, you would like early release of monies before the executor's year's up or the probate notices have expired. You can provide them provide their probate professional with an indemnity to say you will pay some of this money back in the event that they need it if they issue it to you early. But it must be limited to the amount you get and set to a very specific time frame if you need to give an indemnity. The other area you could potentially do it is if there's a missing beneficiary and we can't find someone, you could give indemnity to this that says you will repay the portion of the gift that this other person is entitled to if they come out of the woodwork in a few years. So the short answer is don't give indemnities unless you absolutely have to. Keep an eye out for them, because what they basically mean is if you give an indemnity, it means your charity can't spend the money you get from that estate. So keep it in mind, keep a look for them. Solicitors like to sneak them into things like estate account approvals, receipts, anything like that. So if you find an indemnity on anything, get your red pen out, cross it through, and just tell them you're not accepting their indemnity when you sign the document. So I find the safest way to deal with it. Right, contention. Just look at the time. Yeah, we've got a moment to do that. Okay, contention. Now, this is an area that a lot of people, a lot of loud voices in the sector will tell you is a growing nightmare, and it's going to be a disaster for charities. This kind of thing, contention, particularly when it comes to our lovely friends here and online wills and things like that. From my point of view, and all the data and evidence that my group has, and within my group is Legacy Foresight, it provides a lot of the long-term forecasting to the whole sector. We're seeing pretty much no increase. There is a tiny infinitesimal increase in contentious cases across the sector, but it is almost statistically irrelevant. And we're just not seeing a growth in contentious cases. And even if you do get a contentious case, there's nothing to fear as long as you're properly prepared and don't panic. I think I've put that there in capitals. Yes, I have. So it's really important that if you get involved in contention, you have a calm, measured approach. There's no need to rush to react. You don't need to react within an hour if you get notified of one. There's no need to react that day in most cases. The important thing to do is to get a real handle on what the contention and the challenge you're receiving is. So whether that means talking to key legal partners, there's lots of corporate partners of ILM who are very good at just having an initial chat with you without providing you with a £3,000 bill. There's lots of good solicitors out there who will give you that initial kind of rough advice to get you moving forward. So keep that in mind as you're moving forward there. But don't panic, get advice early and act on it. Act on that advice that you're given carefully and in a considered manner. Train and develop your legacy team, or if you're the legacy person, make sure you have a written plan. a documented plan that is agreed with your management team on how you will approach any contentious challenges that come into your charity. It's absolutely vital you don't fear it. It's really vital that you have a considered, calm approach to dealing with contention that doesn't involve any panic. Because if you panic and overreact, chances are you're going to do something silly for your charity, which you really don't need to do. So the most important thing here is don't fear it, prepare. Be ready to deal with it and have a clear, structured response. Talk to professionals, and then you'll be good to go. And that is that. So that is my kind of top tips. As I said, there wasn't a checklist coming, but I think that's a good place to end, and I think we're good on time as well. There we are. So good time for the Q&A now, I think. Right.
Yeah, brilliant, Paul. Thank you so much for that presentation. There was a lot of information packed in there. So I've looked at the chat. I think there was, Sarah said and mentioned something about, Sarah, you mentioned about some spreadsheets, didn't you? I think when you were on the...
Yeah, it's with estate accounts. Wouldn't it be lovely? I mean, I all get really excited when a set of estate accounts come in a spreadsheet. They've got different ticks for everything, and I know I can run the query, I can check it, and it's really easy compared to when I get sort of 23 pages that look like they've been photocopied about 8 times, and I can't quite read what that was for, and was that Mrs. Goggins or Mrs. Miggins, or it just wouldn't it be nice if maybe we could ask for as a charity sector wide to solicitors to actually have estate accounts provided that way, because they must be using the spreadsheets themselves, surely.
I genuinely don't think they are. I think what they do is they may somebody might use a spreadsheet in the background, but it kind of feels like if they have a secretary these days, which most don't, but if they have a secretary, they just say type that up. Secretary puts them into tables and then sends them to you in that document. So that's why you often end up with estate accounts in Word or as a PDF from Word. But it would be lovely if we could get some sort of general standardized format and have it in a way we could modify it. So i.e. in a spreadsheet of some kind, that would be glorious, but I can't see it happening anytime in the near future. With the greatest respect. Oh, there's one there.
We've got Elizabeth. She says, have you any advice for dealing with legacies with lay executors?
Yes, carefully. I think the way I describe it is the way it works for me. I still agonize over every word I send to a lay exec, be it an email, a letter, or if I'm picking up the phone to them. It's still one of those ones that actually genuinely makes me nervous even after all these years. But what I would say is start small. You've got to start and build up your relationship with the lay executor. Don't put any asks in your first letter. Make your first letter to a lay executor as simple as possible to say, provide your condolences, thank you for being in the will. I'm your contact here at the charity if you need us. And I would not put any asks in. I would not ask anything from them in your first communication, because it can always be taken the wrong way. So keep that small. And then depending on the response to that, then you can gradually increase your communication and think about the asks and build it up slowly over time. If you're dealing with a lay executor, you've got to keep in mind they have a life. To us, this is our job. This is everything we do. To them, it's something they're doing alongside their family, their jobs, their lives, the grief they're dealing with, potentially. So you have to remember this is not front and foremost at the front of their mind. And in most cases, they won't have a clue why the charity is talking to them at an early stage. They'll just go, why are you talking to me? I haven't got any money yet. That's how they'll see it. So I would suggest a very structured, slow build up in your communication with the lay executor, depending on your experience of their communication, as a kind of very quick tip there on how to deal with them. But don't demand too much. Never ever put an ask in anything, a marketing ask in anything, any communication with a lay executor. It will always be taken badly, and it will always damage your charity's reputation, without question. We did quite a large survey on this about 3 years ago now with my group, and it was one of the strongest messages that came out from talking to lay executives that actually done the job. We hate being asked for donation or considering being a member or whatever. They hated any hint of an ask in any communication. So it went down very badly. So that's probably the best I can give you in the time available. But that's so we could do a nice long session on lay executives if it's something that everyone's interested in.
Brilliant. So has anybody got any other questions? There's no more questions in the chat, apart from people wanting to get the links for the information you referred to. So there was a pushing back on solicitors' fees article, and the ILM guide to the breakdown, sort of the vital docs that you should be getting.
Indeed.
So, I mean, I can put those in the follow-up, you know, the information that I send round, put the links in.
Yeah, no problem.
But what I wanted to ask as well, because do you have on your, or in your organisation, is this like a help desk facility?
We do indeed, which I look after. So we provide a free help desk for any charity. It's on our website. You just go to the Legacy Link part of the website and scroll down to help desk, and you can ask us generic questions, any questions you have on cases. In most cases, we will answer them as best we can with no charge in doing that. If you would like us to do any real work on them for you, obviously we can do that, and we would charge just for the minor bits that we could do. But in general, we answer, well, I would say 99% of the questions that come in, they are just as straightforward. We don't understand this. We don't know how to proceed. We don't know what to do about this. And myself and Freya, who is another one of the Legacy Link officers, we deal with all those queries, and we rarely put a bill up, put it that way. So there is a help desk there that's entirely there for you, but we can also provide more fundamental help if you need it as well. So obviously the nature of my group is what we do. So, but the help desk is definitely there, and it is definitely free. And it's not. There's no catch. It is what it is.
Yeah, I think that's a really good service to provide, actually, especially for people that are maybe new to a role, and just to sort of get a bit of confidence that they are doing the right thing, if they're unsure about things. Indeed. Fantastic. So have we got any more questions from anybody? No more questions. There's some people have popped off saying it's a fantastic talk, very knowledgeable, Paul.
Oh, thank you.
And it was a really great session. So it was a fabulous session. So we will hopefully see everybody at our next Legacy Loop as well. So that's all for today, guys. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Huge thanks, Paul. That was fantastic. Thanks very much indeed.
No problem, Oliver. Thank you.
Thank you.